catastrophic economic loss that would have occurred if both basins had been inundated by the Pacific Ocean. In the late 1960s, Vincent and I participated in the Great Lakes Research Program initiated by the Battelle Memorial Institute. But most of my work as a young faculty member focused on problems of urban service delivery and public economies in metropolitan areas. In 1981, I was asked by Paul Sabatier, a colleague for a year at the Center for Interdisciplinary Research at the University of Bielefeld, to make a seminar presentation on organizational learning. I used as my example of organizational learning the set of rules that groundwater producers had developed in the Southern California groundwater basins. Paul then wanted to know why I was so confident that the systems I had studied 15 years earlier were still operating and performing well. At the time, I had no effective answer, other than that the institutions had been so well crafted to fit local circumstances that I presumed they had survived and were faring well. When I returned from Bielefeld, I suggested to one of my doctoral students, William Blomquist, that he answer Sabatier's question as his dissertation. Blomquist found that the institutions that the water producers themselves had designed were still in place and operating effectively. The physical condition of the basins had improved substantially. The very substantial success involved in these cases led us to undertake a study funded by the U.S. Geological Survey, grant number 14080001G1476, of a larger set of groundwater basins in Southern California and a limited set in Northern California to ascertain what factors were associated with the successful evolution of new institutions and with the efficiency and equity of those institutions. Eventually, we will have completed a comparative study of institutional, economic, and physical changes in 12 groundwater basins over a 30 to 50-year period. Although I have been excited about what one can learn from a concentrated effort to study a dozen groundwater basins and the institutions that have evolved for their governance and management over time, such studies alone are not sufficient for the development of a broader theory of institutional arrangements related to the effective governance and management of common pool resources, CPRs. One needs similar information from many other settings to begin to gain the empirical base necessary to improve our theoretical understanding of how institutions work and how individuals change their own institutions. My awareness of the possibility of using detailed case studies written by other authors to obtain a sufficiently rich empirical base for understanding CPRs came about as a result of joining the National Academy of Sciences Panel on Common Property Resource Management in 1985. By the time I was asked to join the panel, its members had commissioned a series of papers to be written by field researchers. The authors were all asked to organize their papers using a framework prepared by Ronald Okerson, 1986. That meant that all of the papers would address not only the physical properties of the resource systems, but also what types of rules were used to regulate entry and use of these systems, what types of interactions resulted, and what types of outcomes were obtained. The papers were presented at an international conference in Annapolis and were published by the National Academy Press, National Research Council, 1986. Some of those papers and some new chapters have been brought together in a new volume, Bromley in Press. Reading those studies, as well as some of the studies cited by those authors, made me aware of two major facts. First, an extraordinarily rich case study literature already existed, written by field researchers who had invested years of effort in obtaining detailed information about the strategies adopted by the appropriators of CPRs and the rules they used. Second, that literature had been written by authors in diverse fields and frequently had appeared in obscure publications. Almost no syntheses of the findings from that literature had been undertaken. Several colleagues at Indiana University began to collect citations to relevant cases, and within a short time, Fenton Martin, who compiled the resultant bibliography, had identified nearly 1,000 cases. More recently, the number was approaching 5.